Today we're talking with Ben Lee, one of our senior team members that's heading up our analytics department, to talk about what it's like to take a data-driven approach and all the different types of methodologies that we're using to drive profitable growth in our ad campaigns. If you like this episode, hit the subscribe button. We got a lot more where this came from. Get yourself a copy of Join or Die Digital Advertising in the Age of Automation. Find it on Amazon or really anywhere where books are sold online. I'm Patrick Gilbert. This is a podcast where we talk about digital advertising, business consulting, and career growth. With me today is Ben Lee. He's one of our senior team members here at Adventure Media. We're still in this journey of filling out this program and evaluating all the different methods that we can use. So I want to run through a few of them. Mm-hmm. And if you can give just like the elevator pitch as to like what that is and why it's useful. If we start, so we have regression, right? So like explain the elevator pitch on that and where and why it's useful in the context of digital advertising.
So in the context of digital advertising, so what regression does is just to, there's two parts of it, to correlate or to find causation. Causation, I will not speak about it. It's more complex to that. But why we do regression so often is because there's a lot of data sets that can be joined together but are not digital. And through regression, we can measure the output of a particular behavior by using statistics. And because if we do not use statistics, we end up defaulting to any attribution model that whatever platform prescribes you. But that does not mean that it's just the source of truth. Because at the end of the day, you know your numbers, whether you're selling something or not. And you want to find out why are they selling to begin with. Facebook says something, Google says something. Where do we really land? And that's when statistics come to kind of be like the kind of a secondary check or to kind of show kind of source of truth, so you can see, okay, there's a range of where we're working with, so we really know. But where regression really comes in, I think it's just especially offline data. There's lots of offline data, offline behavior that we need to connect back.
So measuring the impact of a TV ad or a Spotify ad.
Yeah.
Or even, I mean, we talk about this a lot, is like YouTube ads. You're really not going to see a lot of the conversion data from any sort of like brand performance type campaign, because you're going to see it, you're going to try and measure it based on like a lift in direct traffic to the site or something, but without a true formula and a model to prove whether or not it's driving revenue, you're just not going to see it in Google. Like you need something that's external, and that's essentially pulling in offline data when you can. Okay, so that's regression. The next thing I think that we have on this list here is survey analysis. Everyone knows what a survey is, but how do you think there's a unique spin on it in pulling this information in to make it actionable for digital ad campaigns?
I think the great thing about surveying is pretty old school. It's always been around or whatnot. But I thought something that we can do and when we should do is because it's a nice way, especially when you want to reach out and understand your client sentiment. I think surveys does a really good job in doing so. And with this analysis, it helps inform clients to learn how to separate their email list, because you can pay for surveys and just $10 a survey or whatnot, get information. But if you want to do it for free, it's possible. The important part here is how do you slice and dice your email list, because once you're able to slice and slice your segment or email list, this way we can do surveys and compare two different groups, and that's important. Let's say people that do read your email, you do your email blast, your email campaign, whatnot, they do open often. Some open at the same rate but purchase. We can actually send a survey to people that open at the same rate, slice the list into half, and one that purchase might ask why. And there's ways to do so. I mean, you don't need to pay for. I mean, okay, you still need to pay us for it, I hope. But you don't need to pay for surveys. There's a lot of this customer information or customers that you already have a list, and there's ways to kind of glean more insights from your customers just by organizing a list properly.
And I think with that, we've learned this the hard way, that surveys are very expensive to run and administer and very time consuming. And if you're not doing it the right way, it could be the biggest waste of money that you've ever invested in. Yeah. And I mean, we've done it, right? Like you've laughed at us in hearing stories about ways that we've administered surveys. I mean, like you've just wasted amounts of money that I don't even want to speak about because it's so frustrating. But yeah, so there has to be a methodology and a strategy behind that. Okay, so the next thing, do you have any sort of example or practical example about some sort of sales trend analysis and tying that into, I imagine, forecasting in a way?
Sales. So there's two analysis that I found. I like to call or borrow from Google whenever they release the betas. So sales trend and I would say linear optimization are the two analysis that I would call it still within beta, because it's not too easy to kind of predict those like sales trend.
Mm-hmm.
We can identify patterns. Like I gave for example was the micro rum. So that patterns within behavior of what they purchase and what they can go towards. But the difficulty of it all is with sales trend, we're trying to predict not just digital, but for the business, the holistic picture for the business. And that becomes a little difficult because the reason for this analysis, I mean, we're still trying. I think that's maybe ask me again 6 months time, but the goal of it is to try to see where they land, correct, in the future. So what drives that is really, at the end of the day, is do you want to answer, trying to predict the future, where they land 6 months, 9 months in kind of revenue. Obviously, we're assuming all things constant, but what variables are we really changing here is really the media spend, the media strategy around it, and that, like linear optimization, the difficulty of that, whether it's a sales trend analysis or linear optimization, the second the part of answering that question or questions is attribution.
Mm-hmm.
That is difficult because sure, I can do a financial approach to sales trend analysis, which I know your Goldman Sachs or whatever, they release their quarterly reports or when Netflix is gonna land their price per share and whatnot. You can do that kind of a financial modeling, which we can do if you want to hire us. But the idea is to recommend to the account managers how to spend their media,
right?
Because we think the revenue is going to be here based on industry trends, whatnot, GDP. But how much are we going to spend, correct? Because that's what people are hiring us for. So they're not going to hire us just to produce a kind of market report. They want to know that with this market report, how we're using it for media spend. And that goes back to attribution, which is difficult with the whole changes that's happening with iOS 14, 14.5. It's hard to observe such behaviors. The math is there. We're trying to crack the code. So right now, not yet. But I think those are the two, especially linear optimization. I love the math behind it, but it's a struggle to try to get
it's
it right.
Also a lot of inputs, right? So like that's also the data cleaning aspect of it in the Python, and we're looking at some other technology that we're hopefully going to bring on that can help solve some of these problems. Mm-hmm. But you had made the comment to me yesterday, and I had said, like, isn't this something we can solve with linear programming? And you made a joke to say, like, if that was the simple answer, then you should IPO a company because it just can't really be done. Well, theoretically it could, but it's a very, very hard problem to solve.
Yeah, it's a hard problem to solve because a couple of variables. Linear optimization, the math of end of it is that I want to get a set output. Maybe I want to get, like you do, so whoever's you do does Google Ads or Facebook, ROAS target and whatnot. It's the same math behind Google's AI approach, which is actually linear optimization. But they do well because they have that data within Google, so they optimize well. Facebook has the data, or maybe not now, but they do optimize with it. But now, as an agency, we're talking about cross-channel kind of optimization. So without the data,
And let me try and break this down because I feel like we just glossed over that. But this is a true example of the value of this type of study, because when you look at Google and say, okay, well, we want to have a shared budget, or we want to have a smart shopping campaign, and our target return on ad spend is 400%, and we're going to trust that Google is going to be able to spend our budget across 3,000 products and hopefully be able to return the best results ever. Mm-hmm. And the question of how do they allocate that budget across all these products? And the answer is because they have their own methods of linear optimization in terms of making a prediction about product A versus product B and making a decision in real time about whether or not you should spend that budget. So if you look at any sort of pacing, how discount pacing in terms of we're going to spend X amount over the course of the day. Let's say you have $1,000 budget in your Google ad campaign in a day. Google's trying to generate as much revenue with that as possible. It's not on accelerated delivery. It's not just spending that based off of how many people are performing searches on Google or clicking on ads, and then there's a potential that you'll run out of budget by 8 a.m. It's the complete opposite of that. Google uses linear optimization to be able to pace your budget evenly throughout the day to maximize the amount of return that it can get. Facebook does the same thing. That's why things like campaign budget optimization are so valuable. Mm-hmm. However, the question becomes, one, when you're doing cross-channel, so how do you have a budget when you have Facebook, Google, you're running ads on Pinterest, LinkedIn, and all these other types of platforms? How do you allocate that at the top level? But also when you have other elements of your product stack or your strategy that isn't as easily translated or transferred that Google can figure out in real time. Maybe there's a particular product that is more valuable to you. Maybe you did uncover the gateway product that you're trying to specialize and set out. So these types of things can be solved with very, very complicated math, but that's where linear optimization comes to play.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult. I think the math, we can do it. It's just the attribution thing that we've been exploring, like GA4, BigQuery, Define. End of the day is unique identifiers. There's a reason why the Google Analytics defaults to last click, because they haven't solved this issue. And that's why with last click, they know you came from a referral site and you entered the website. That's information that can be observed, could be gleaned, and that's why they default to last click. But what about views?
Right.
What about television? There's things that do matter, but there's no observable behavior. It's like, how do I know somebody's eyeball was on this ad?
Right.
or television ad. So it's very, very difficult for those metrics to observe, but we know it's important.
The last piece I want to hit on is just to circle back to the importance of creativity in this, because none of this stuff will ever become a conversation if someone didn't start with that if someone didn't have an idea about what's happening and be able to ask that question, because all this stuff is just answers to questions that people have to ask. And it's really hard work, but a lot of it is just finding the right question and then doing a lot of cleaning of the data. And then ultimately the actual analysis takes, a couple minutes. But one of the problems that we had recently solved was a new client came on board, and just in going through the minutia of the Facebook account, had realized that there had been no coherent strategy to their remarketing efforts. Some months they had spent a lot, some months they had spent very little, and it wasn't very clear on like what they were trying to do or what the net impact of that was. So we had just thrown that idea out to you and your team and said, hey, listen, like, can you figure out if there's a way to measure like whether or not the remarketing is actually making any impact? Is there essentially a correlation between larger remarketing spend and an overall increase in customers? And it wasn't like, it's a simple question to ask. It's not exactly the simplest question to answer, because there's a lot of different variables that you have to pull and clean to be able to get an answer to that. Ultimately, you had found there was no correlation. And so we went to the client and recommended and said, hey, listen, we're going to cut out 70% of your marketing budget tomorrow. And we actually don't expect that to negatively impact the amount of sales we're getting, because we have data that shows that your remarketing is not actually working. That doesn't mean it can't work. That doesn't mean that we throw away the strategy forever. But as it's currently set up, the current remarketing campaigns that are running in your account, they're just wasting money. So we're going to drop those out, and we're automatically going to see a positive reduction in your cost per customer acquisition. And they were like, oh, they were like, oh, that sounds great. What? Like, they couldn't believe the fact, like, we had talked about all the statistical modeling, and then we got to like the punchline, the big reveal of like, so we think that this is actually going to have an immediate impact on your campaign starting today. And like, they were absolutely blown away. And like, going into a meeting with that level of confidence because of that analysis that took, I know that you had spent like a good 2 days working on that specifically, is just next level type of stuff that we're able to do now. And it's a lot of fun. I guess for me to be able to talk about those results is one thing, but it really is incredible to be able to use that as part of our overall strategy and our product stack. So I think that this type of work is really exciting. This is just the beginning of it. We're continuing to develop all these new ways to do this at scale and more effectively. And every single client that we've worked with has posed a new challenge. And just asking those questions and having everybody learn more about the different problems that we can solve it's been very energetic. As far as like, oh my goodness, like I never thought we'd be able to dive into that. It's been such a cool topic. So I'm excited for where it's going to go. But yeah, do you have any like last thoughts as far as like where we are in the current state of this and what the next step is and what you are excited about, where we're going from a data standpoint?
I guess for any, I don't get me speaking about data analysts and whatnot, but I think working with a larger data set and more complex questions do challenge me and do challenge the team. So that's what I like. And this, before I guess I end this podcast, just shout out to Avery and Nakama. They ask the toughest questions. So whenever they come to me, I'm always half excited or half scared. I was like, let me hide in the bathroom.
Amazing. Ben, it's been a pleasure. My last question, as always, what's your opinion on the best place to hide a dead body?
The second page of a search engine result.
Why did you say it like that? Amazing. Okay, so thank you, Ben. This has been the How to Hide a Dead Body podcast. Appreciate having you on. And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time.